Since the beginning, agricultural production has tried to minimize the extent of uncultivated perimeters, considering them unnecessary and unproductive, as well as possible sources of diseases and weeds which could harm crops. However, these areas have always existed in the agricultural landscape as they held various functions connected to rural activities, becoming an integral and distinguishing feature of the landscape itself. Hedgerows, lines of trees and ditches serve to determine plots and to prevent the farmed livestock escaping. The trees at the edges also established the property boundaries, provided shelter and relief for agricultural workers, as well as providing firewood and twigs for silkworms. The introduction of intensive and mechanized agriculture has further reduced these marginal areas, converting them into production. So, in a few years, the agricultural landscape, originally varied and rich in natural elements, has lost the biodiversity that characterized it, undergoing a gradual process of decline and simplification. Such simplification of landscape was favored by agricultural activities, increasingly economically assisted, characterized by monoculture cultivation, managed with heavy machinery, consuming a lot of energy and using a massive amount of industrial fertilizers and chemicals for weed control, diseases and pests. This radical transformation of the land has not only depleted the landscape, but also promoted the occurrence of erosion and floods, in addition to the pollution of groundwater and surface water. One of the main consequences of environmental simplification has been the decrease of the biodiversity of insects, in particular those useful to agriculture, such as pollinating insects. The decrease of the variety of species of insects has consequently resulted in a dwindling number of their predators, such as amphibians and all other species connected to the food chain. Lately, following the deepening knowledge of the ecosystems and the relationship between fauna and flora, these marginal areas have been revalued. These areas are now recognized as very important to environmental and ecological functions, such as the promotion of biodiversity, reducing the need to use pesticides, the filtration and purification of pollutants, besides contributing to boosting yields themselves, for example, by favoring the activity of beneficial insects. But how can we avoid this decline and simplification of agricultural land? The Kasinadza farms, in response to this challenge, have implemented agro-environmental interventions, using the marginal areas of rice paddy fields and creating the so-called rice field margins. By adjusting the height of the main channel using water gates, it is possible to achieve a uniform flooding of the rice paddy and of the whole wet area. On the contrary, the drying out of the rice paddy is done by lowering the wetland level. This system, in addition to greatly simplifying the traditional management of water levels in the paddy field, is also a very interesting agro-environmental feature, because it allows us to keep the edges of the rice paddies with a constant presence of water even during the dry periods, forming a complex ecosystem that benefits from both humid and dry woodland areas. All this is an indispensable condition for the continuity of the life cycles of many living creatures that pour into the rice fields at the time of flooding, bringing biodiversity and beneficial insects in the cultivated field. Unfortunately, this is no longer being accomplished by the rice paddies grown with current conventional methods. These marginal wetlands create a reserve of useful biodiversity in fighting pests, as well as being an important element of the landscape diversification. For example, studies show the number of mosquito larvae was reduced by 10,000 times in comparison to conventional rice fields, in addition to being a source of habitat and food for the insects useful to agricultural production. Moreover, these wetlands, born from a centuries-old network of canals covering the whole agricultural territory, act as natural ecological corridors capable of influencing the spread of flora and fauna in new natural areas, however small, that alone would not be able to create new biodiversity. The experience of Casinazza shows the creation of these wetlands integrated with the rice fields, using 10 to 15% of the agricultural land, allows the development of complex relationships between living organisms, making possible an agriculture that is environmentally sustainable. With these agricultural practices used in Casinazza, operational costs were reduced by eliminating the use of insecticides, without changing the unit production. But above all, the landscape value of the area increased, an asset of inestimable value that makes the farmer a producer and a guardian of the rural landscape. In the Casinazza farms, recreating the environment means recreating the beauty of the landscape and respecting nature, which, with its balance, activates its own defense mechanisms for a sustainable agriculture. A sustainable agriculture not only benefits the environment, but is also economically sustainable, which will maintain soil fertility and ensure the quality of its agricultural products for our future and particularly that of our grandchildren.